Hello all, welcome to Healthcare Hangouts. I'm Kathy Brown of Brown Knows Social Media, and we have a very interesting guest and topic today. I would like to introduce to you Vickie Milazzo. Vickie, would you like to say hello?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today.
Vickie is the founder of the Vickie Milazzo Institute. It's an institute that is the oldest and the largest legal nurse training institute. Do I have that right, Vickie?
Yes, legal nurse consulting. These are RNs that consult with attorneys and insurance companies on medical-related types of cases.
And you were a pioneer in this, right?
Yes, 32 years ago. It's hard to believe.
So you have not only gotten the respect of the medical field of physicians and nurses, but also attorneys. That's got to be like world rocking, right?
Well, I am a registered nurse. I'm master's prepared, and I'm also an attorney. So I started my business by actually consulting with attorneys, and then registered nurses were so interested in what I was doing that I thought, this is a great opportunity to help other nurses also do what I'm doing.
Wonderful. Well, part of the reason that we're here together today is that I saw an article that was quoting you, and I later saw a survey request from you relating to the stressors of the nursing career. And I thought that was a very interesting topic to talk about, and I think that the stress that nurses feel goes beyond the nurses themselves and affects a whole world of healthcare. And I thought it would be good for you to share your survey results, which you are so gracious to do, and to give us a little sneak preview of what you found out from the survey that you conducted. Can you tell us a little bit about, first of all, can you tell us why you thought this survey was significant?
Well, it's significant because we know, especially with Obamacare, this is some new things that nurses are facing, a lot of government regulations. We also know that with the whole managed care concept over the years, we've heard from nurses how stressed out they are. So anecdotally, I've been knowing this for quite some time because I'm working with nurses nationwide. But we wanted to actually do a survey, and we wanted to really see what nurses had to say about this as a large issue. We know a lot of nurses, because they're 50 years plus, the nursing population is aging, as we all know. And so nursing, in many ways, is sometimes better suited for a younger person, but that's not the state of nursing today. So we wanted to really get a better understanding, not just of what we hear anecdotally, but really do a survey. We sent out the survey over a 2-week period. We had 3,312 nurses respond. And the response alone actually, for me, validated just how important of a subject this is. And while I wasn't surprised entirely by the results, I will tell you that the survey reveals that stress levels of nurses are really at very dangerous levels. And in some ways, the people taking care of all of you who are out there listening, or the patients, your families, your loved ones, the very people treating them, I think many are sick themselves. And so it's time for our healthcare system, I think, to take notice, to recognize this elephant in the room, these stressed out nurses, and do something about it.
And it is an elephant in the room because these are not stressors that have popped up just recently. This has been, all of these things you're identifying have been growing speed and really capturing the market in problems that are stopping nurses from getting their work done. Well, I've got the copy, so I'm not going to ruin it for you. Why don't we start with, let's look at the very first stressor that you would like to talk about.
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, lack of sleep, okay? The survey revealed that 64% of the nurses are pretty severely sleep deprived. This is 64%. Now, mind you, when we talk about registered nurses, we're talking about an intelligent population who knows what they have to do in order to stay healthy, right? So these are informed people that understand the importance of sleep. Yet 64% in the survey conveyed that they are severely sleep deprived. Only 17% of the respondents said that they almost always get 7 to 8 hours of sleep. Now, research has shown that if you're operating on 5 to, let's say, 6 hours on a regular basis, it's practically like operating like driving an automobile under the influence. In other words, people just can't keep pushing at this level repeatedly. But our nurses are telling us this is how they live.
Well, and this reminds me of the days when my husband was in residency, because when he was in residency, he got no sleep, and they actually made changes to that because they found those very results applied to physicians who were having to work back-to-back shifts, and those 48-hour shifts, 36-hour shifts were really putting people at risk, and so they did something about it, and they made limitations. Are there limitations on nurses' schedules right now?
Well, most nurses are working 12-hour shifts, and so I think that kind of goes hand in hand with that lack of sleep, because probably for some people, while you might have one RN that can go home and just crash, you might have another RN that has to go home and you know, basically get themselves prepped to go to bed. They can't just go straight to sleep because they're still revved up, so to speak. So I think the 12-hour shifts somewhat are contributing to that.
Are they also changing shifts? Because I know some of my friends will say they're on a certain shift for so many days and then they switch.
Yeah, that's another huge issue. You know, most nurses will work a standard shift, either day shift or night shift. But for sure, the person that this is hardest on is the person who is shifting back and forth between day and night. And again, you know, the research is real clear that even somebody who works all night shifts, there's a big link to physical illness, diabetes and breast cancer. So we know that we can't close the hospital down during those night hours, but one thing we certainly want to make sure of is that nurses have a regular time. It's not going back and forth. I myself, I did it when I first entered nursing. A lot of times it is your younger nurses that have to kind of move around a lot. But just to give you a quote, one of our respondents said, "Working nights has my routine off. I feel sleepy and lethargic all the time and am afraid that I will make mistakes at work." For many registered nurses, working a night shift is often not a choice. You know, some people are morning people, some people are night people. There might be a person out there who loves the night shift. I knew nurses like that, but likewise, this might not be a choice for somebody who's not a night person.
So are there any things you can do if there isn't a choice to have a night shift? Because I know you can only have so many day shifts and so many night shifts, and people are going to take those night shifts and wait for the day shifts to become available. So are there some things that can be done to make that a little more palatable?
Well, you know, it's kind of interesting because in the airline world, they actually have sleep opportunities for flight attendants, right? When they're waiting for the next airplane to go out or something like that. I don't know how realistic it is to say to give nurses that opportunity to take a nap. But again, while many of us find that hard to fit a nap into our work day or work night, maybe that's something we should be looking at.
Mm-hmm.
It only has to be 30 minutes. We're not talking the 3-hour nap. In fact, we don't want anybody to be taking the 3-hour nap. We know that from a napping perspective, 30 minutes is all you need.
I don't want my nurse taking naps. At least
I know. And so these are not going to be easy solutions because, again, a hospital has to be open 24/7. We know
right.
that.
So let's move to the next area. You want to talk about diet?
Yeah.
Okay, because
wow.
I was shocked. I know that we have a national epidemic, but apparently it is just as widespread among nurses because it shows 40% of nurses are overweight or obese. 40%? And why is that?
Well, interestingly, again, you know, the survey revealed that only 23% of the registered nurses eat 2 balanced meals a day. 46% said sometimes they eat 2 balanced meals, and 29% said they rarely eat 2 balanced meals a day. and 2% basically said they're living off the vending machine. Okay, but again, I think it's important to understand there's obviously something about the system and the work environment that they're in that is contributing to this. It could be the 12-hour shifts, but nurses know about nutrition. There's no reason why a nurse would voluntarily not eat properly. But again, stress contributes to poor diet, right? Because when people are stressed out, they also make bad choices. So a lot of times, if they're having a rough shift and they go down to the cafeteria for lunch or dinner, they might choose that more comfort food because their stress levels are so high. Or maybe they're not planning in advance. But I have to say that I was somewhat shocked. The other thing is nurses, all nurses will pretty much tell you they don't take 30 minutes to eat lunch. You know, they'll gulp down their food in 5 or 10 minutes. And so they don't see a meal necessarily as a time to replenish. It's like they're just gulping it down to get back to their patients.
Well, and in a lot of cases, I'm not sure that there is healthy food available because now, again, I'm talking years ago, but when my husband was doing his night shift at the hospital, the cafeteria wasn't open, and so he lived on Mountain Dew and cookies.
Yeah, and again, you know, it all goes with the sleep deprivation and, you know, the stress on the job that even if we have something that's presented to us that's more nutritious, we make a bad choice. So I believe hospitals, they have aimed to provide more nutritious food. But again, that's certainly something all healthcare facilities could do, you know, work on trying to have better meals and snacks available. And for nurses to recognize that, hey, you know what, it's my responsibility. And so maybe when I'm at home, I cannot cook a great lunch for myself or plan a great dinner. But today we have so many convenience options available. There's so many stores, grocery stores today that have beautiful foods that are already prepared and quite healthy. And so I think it's about making a conscious choice. That's what nurses need to do. And to understand that nutrition feeds your energy, feeds how you feel about so many things, you know, your mental state, your physical energy on the job. So it all contributes.
And that's a great segue into having energy to spend time with family, because I know that that's what keeps us going when we have family time and we look forward to family time and we go to work and we get our work done and we come back and we celebrate what we've done for the day with our family and we go do fun things at night. And you have in your survey results the interference with personal life.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was very interesting because we asked the question, do you do something fun outside of work at least once a week? And again, only 12% said yes to this answer. 57% said, I try, but it's tough. And 30% said, I'm too tired and too stressed to have any fun. And we're talking about once a week. We're not talking about, you know, RNs being party animals here. I have to say, I personally was shocked at this finding because I would think anybody, no matter what kind of work they do, can find an opportunity or create an opportunity to do something fun once a week. But again, I think what happens is they obviously, the stress is at such a dangerous level that either they don't have the energy to go out and do something fun, or maybe they just don't feel that they have it in them.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to share with you something that I thought was really precious when I was a young mother. And the quality time that I had with my kids was very important. And we were very blessed to work for a hospital that provided an on-site daycare so that when my husband was at work, he could walk across the parking lot, a very short, I think it was across the ER entrance, and he could pick up the kids, give them a kiss, say hello, do whatever, and I could go and stop in and see them, and sometimes we would stop in and see them together, and it was like a little mini family visit. And I can't tell you how much that reduced the family stress that we had in those early days, that if hospitals have the ability to do that, it's just such a wonderful blessing for employees. They really do appreciate it.
And that's such a great point, Kathy, because as our baby boomers exit the nursing profession and we're attempting to attract more younger registered nurses, we are going to be attracting more both men and women who have children and, as you're suggesting, would like to have something that allows them to feel less stressed out about having those children. And that's a beautiful gesture and something that really probably doesn't cost a whole lot.
Yeah, and I'm sure that the hospital didn't know it at the time, but it really did make for a loyal employee. There were other opportunities that we passed up and didn't even consider because that was so valuable to us.
It's a great point because in the business world, there's a lot of studies and research that talks about how companies retain employees. And a lot of times retention is not based on salary or even benefits. It's based on some of those small supportive structures that are in place for those employees.
Mm-hmm. All right, the next topic, this is one I'm really interested to hear about, lack of authority. And I have to tell you, I work with a lot of physicians. I have a community full of physicians, and a lot of times I'm in environments where there are a lot of physicians, and it's not uncommon to hear a physician come and say, "Yeah, I just let into my nurse because she didn't do this right or she didn't do that right, and now she knows better." And I'm not saying that everybody has that bad attitude, but it's shocking to me anytime someone says that, because I would never go to a PTA meeting or a neighborhood homeowners association meeting and say, "Yeah, I just let into my son. He'll never do that again."
Right. So it's kind of like a twofold issue. One is lack of authority, and second, it's the respect and appreciation. And so an MD who responds that way to an RN, obviously there is the lack of respect and appreciation. And we, in fact, surveyed on both subjects. And in terms of respect and appreciation, this again, I mean, 3,312 RNs, only 16% said that they felt respected. And 34% responded outright that they are not respected and appreciated on the job. And then 50% said, sometimes. So if we don't have the consistency, then we have to assume that is stressful. In fact, in some ways, it's almost more stressful not to know when you're going to be respected and appreciated, right?
I think if you don't have the respect, then you're not going to have the authority, because people aren't going to. That's just assumed. That's what defines the authority you have, is the respect that you're given.
You got it. And so one of the women who commented, or one of the RNs, I should say, said not having the authority to take care of the things that need to be done, but being responsible for it. And so I thought this is a really good expression of why lack of authority is so stressful to registered nurses. And as to lack of authority, 24% said they have no authority at all. None, ever. In other words, at least their perception when they're on the job is they don't have the authority to get their job done the right way. And 51% said sometimes they had it, but they wish they had more. And only 24% said they had the authority to do their job. So lack of authority is a huge stressor. In fact, in many ways, it's been pretty much busted that it's the hours that a person works that create stress, right? Because you can have, for example, entrepreneurs that own their own business work a 12-hour day and they're loving it. And that's because they have control and they have authority. So that lack of authority, that's a constant stressor on that registered nurse.
Well, let's get down into the weeds here. Can you give some examples of specific situations where having authority would increase the quality of care or outcome or any positive outcome at all? Do you have any specific examples of where that could be improved?
Well, sure. I mean, I think in order to address that, we also have to talk about the fact that the survey suggested that they also feel that they don't have a voice. In other words, that they're not really heard. And so the lack of authority kind of goes hand in hand with feeling that they don't have a voice, they're not being heard, nobody's listening. So then even if they have good ideas, those good ideas never get communicated because nobody listens anyway. So, at the end of the day, we're entering a very significant era in healthcare. We all know with the whole new reimbursement issues that are on the table, where hospitals are going to basically not get paid for every service rendered, but basically get paid and reimbursed based on how that person is treated and how they leave. So in other words, the person can't be coming back for the same problem over and over that the hospital should have fixed the first time, and the hospital think they're going to get reimbursed for it. So I think it's important for healthcare facilities to know that the more they have the players who are in the trenches looking out for that healthcare facility, the better it's going to be to the bottom dollar of the healthcare system, right?
Definitely.
Because they're the ones who are responsible for those patients, and when they begin to feel like, I'm responsible but I have no authority, they stop communicating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm playing in my head all the different situations that I can remember with my own family's health situations where we knew that the nurse knew that something different would make a better outcome, but standing orders were standing orders, and there wasn't a physician there to change anything, and so we had to go with what was ordered, and we went around the barn in some cases to make the outcome better. Thank goodness, because the nurses knew a way to do that, but being able to just speak up and have someone listen would definitely have made that an easier journey for all of us.
And one of the things that any healthcare facility can do is, if we think about this is a profession where the majority are baby boomers. These are very experienced people working in this industry. And so it pays for that healthcare facility to leverage that experience of these longtime RNs, to give them some authority, to give them a voice, and to let them sit at the management table, because this is, again, something that came out in the survey, that they feel like, they're being managed, but in many ways mismanaged, because they don't feel like management really understands them. In fact, I had one quote that I thought really summed that one up good. Anyway, I can't get my hands on it at the moment, but what I remember about the quote is the person basically saying the people who are making the decisions for me and for the patients don't even really have the experience to make the decision.
Mm-hmm.
So whether that's a person's perception or reality doesn't really matter, because if the perception is I'm not being managed properly, then that lack of respect is working both ways.
So when you say that nurses should have a seat at the leadership table, are you saying in addition to CNOs?
Yeah, because I think we all know that most CNOs are pretty far removed from the trenches. And, I've met many CNOs myself. I've worked with many of them over the years, and I have great respect for them. But, at the end of the day, I know something we do at our company is, in our company, we obviously have executives, we have managers, but we always want to hear from people who are in the trenches, right? Because managers have a way of filtering, and most registered nurses who are in the trenches are going to have a lot better ideas on how to get the job done efficiently and effectively than the person removed sitting in an office somewhere.
So it sounds like they need to do Undercover Boss. Is that what you're suggesting?
Sure, why not? It's a great idea.
So I'm going to let you pick the next topic, because I've already jumped all over the place and probably messed you up. So
Again, we talked about the mismanagement, and one of the things that nurses can also do, we said they should let nurses have a seat at the table, but one thing I think nurses can do, and sometimes are guilty of, is do less complaining and do more positive, constructive communication. I think this is one thing that would perhaps help to afford the respect. So, I always like to think, like, what do I have control over? So a nurse may not have control over whether an MD respects him or her, or whether a manager is doing a great job as a manager. But they also want to try and be tuned into their own behaviors. And I know we hear this a lot. In fact, it even showed up in some of the survey comments that some RNs felt that, one additional thing that added to the stress was working side by side with people who complain too much.
That's a very good point.
Complainers don't get respect.
Well, and I also think that if a nurse has a good suggestion, rather than complaining and just saying that the way the current system is doesn't work, to be able to understand the motivation behind the people who have the power to make changes is going to make those, to be able to communicate it in those terms is going to be a lot more successful conversation, understanding where the dollars come from, what hospitals have to have in order to meet the requirements to get the reimbursement, so that they can take those into account and not dismiss them, because whether we like it or not, hospitals have to have money to stay in business.
Absolutely, it is a business, and a lot of RNs don't like the fact that it's a business, but that is the reality. And I think you're bringing up another really good point, which is most RNs, if they want to be happier on the job, they should get as involved as they can. Get involved in the committee that you can volunteer on. Because I remember when I worked at the staff level, I had a similar attitude about managers, that they didn't really know what we were doing in the trenches. But then when I myself became an owner and a boss, I began to have more appreciation for those people that did manage me. And a lot of times when you are putting yourself in a place where you're interacting and understanding some of the rationale, then again, your job's less stressful because you're not second guessing, why are they doing this thing?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Oh, and I do want to mention, when we're talking about making suggestions to management, if there's nothing else you look at, and you're probably going to talk about this later, patient satisfaction. If you can relate back any changes to patient satisfaction surveys. I'm married to a hospital administrator. I'll tell you, all of a sudden, I have his attention anytime I use those magic words.
Well, patient satisfaction is really important, but in the business world, we know that an external customer can never be satisfied when the internal customer is not.
That's right.
One of the things that I would love for the healthcare system to really, get tuned into. I mean, at the end of the day, there is a big elephant in the hospital room. And if we continue to ignore the big elephant in the hospital room, we're never going to have those good patient satisfaction surveys. Unhappy nurses, unhappy patients.
Yeah, and as a patient, you can tell when someone's not happy, and it does rub off. So the next one I have on the list here is feeling the need to do everything oneself. Well, my immediate question is, well, how would you suggest that they do that differently?
Well, first of all,
do everything better than anybody else would do it, right?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, this is kind of a catch-22 because nurses are very independent. I know only 11% of the registered nurses said that they can even delegate, right? So they do feel like I'm having to do all of it myself. And that is also associated with what they perceive to be as an unrealistic workload. So just to give you an example, one of the respondents said, no breaks, nothing to eat or drink. Now, we're talking about a 12-hour shift here. Peeing one time because you're overwhelmed with your workload. Okay, so while I'm giving you one quote, I can tell you this is a common joke among nurses that they don't get to go to the bathroom. So when somebody feels like I can't even get up and go, use the bathroom, that's an unrealistic workload. And nurses are dealing with a lot out there, right? They're dealing with patients, they're dealing with doctors, they're dealing with administrators, they're dealing with new technologies because of the electronic medical records and all of the new technologies associated with that. And they're dealing with all these government regulations. So a lot's coming at them. It's not just a patient that they have to take care of. There's a lot of other variables that are influencing that workload.
Mm-hmm. Which brings us to insufficient compensation. And I was shocked that I live in one of the states known to have the lowest wages in nursing. You have several states listed. Shall we shame them publicly?
Sure, why not?
Okay. Iowa, Alabama, North Dakota, Kansas, and Tennessee have the lowest wages for RNs.
Yeah.
So what is the typical national range for RN's salary?
Probably 50 to 60 grand, somewhere in there. Yeah. But again, our survey, because it's not just about salary, it's about perception of, am I feeling compensated for what I do, right? And so, at the end of the day, how much a person is being paid doesn't always tell the whole story. But only 16% said outright, yeah, I'm fairly paid. 40% said they're not fairly compensated. And then 44% said, yeah, but I do need more remuneration. So, 44% are kind of basically saying, it's not that I'm not getting a good wage, but I could definitely use more remuneration. But 40% outright said not fairly compensated.
Well, in my mind, the compensation is directly contributing to the other factors, because I know in our household, we look forward to having enough money that when it is time for a vacation, we can go do something that's truly going to be vacating, that we're not stuck at home where everybody knows we live and the phone rings anyway. And being able to have that food that's healthy, that you can pack with you and take with you instead of that vending machine food, you have to have the money to be able to afford some of those luxuries to stay healthy. Gym memberships and things like that, if they're not provided by the employers, are all things that take money, and you have to earn that money so that you can stay healthy earning the money.
And for some RNs, forget about owning a home unless they have a spouse that's contributing significant income as well. So, again, we have our baby boomers. They're about to exit. It's going to create an entire new potential nursing shortage if we're not attracting young nurses. And to attract young nurses into the profession. And by the way, our survey suggested that it's not just the more experienced older nurses that are stressed. It's the younger nurses too. And these younger nurses, they don't have the tolerance that the baby boomer nurses have. They will exit the profession, and it's going to create a huge stressor. So as you're suggesting, the healthcare system is going to have to figure out how to attract and retain these younger people, because for sure it's a different generation than the baby boomers.
Now, healthcare reform is part of the movement in healthcare reform is having lower level people do some of the higher level procedures now. So I know in the case of like physician assistants and nurse practitioners, they're going to be taking on even more stress and a larger role in the primary care of patients. Is this going to play into the RN role as well? Are they going to be seeing more responsibility, more duties, or not? Do you know?
Well, what I'm hearing from registered nurses who are pretty high up in hospital settings is that probably the future is going to involve more technicians and RNs being responsible for these technicians. We're not seeing that played out completely across the U.S. yet. But again, if an RN is expected to be responsible for a patient and anything that's done connected to that patient, then we're going to have to figure out how to give them a voice. A lot of people in the public don't even know that RNs, their services are not directly billed for, which is one of, I think, a huge errors in the part of healthcare system. A physical therapist, their services are billed for, and MD services are billed for, but not a registered nurse. The registered nurse comes along with the bed, right? So if we're not careful, I think what's going to happen is it's not just nurse practitioners taking on more responsibilities, but it's going to also be RNs having to be responsible for more patients, but with less sophisticated people to do the work, i.e. technicians.
Mm-hmm.
And that's scary to especially experienced RNs.
Well, I think we've already covered the respected and appreciated, because I jumped the gun on that one. So I'd like to move to the next one, and this is one that is going to be a touchy subject, but mismanagement is a major stressor for nurses. You want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, and it really revealed itself, especially in the comments. It was like overwhelming in the comments that was one of the biggest stressors. And we had quite a few comments about the 12-hour shifts and the long hours and the lack of breaks, but the mismanagement issue was overwhelming. And a healthcare system or facility, if they can try to figure that out, and again, so much of the mismanagement, I suspect, might not even be mismanagement at all. It might just be where the nurses feel like they're not being heard. And the other thing is, we do have comments on nurses that feel like when they try to do their job the right way, they get their hands slapped, as opposed to the nurse who just stays quiet. So the nurse who wants to do the right thing is often the nurse who ends up getting in trouble. That's not a good way to manage.
Well, in the comments that you have in the survey results and things people said, it really sounded like that there could be some benefit to more people skills, some actual leadership training of the management to understand how to address some of these things. It talked about the backstabbing and the things that are really unhealthy work environment. Those are not things that have to take place in a work environment if you have a strong leader who knows how to handle that.
Absolutely. And, one of the recommendations that we put into the report was, really working on the culture in the workplaces, which is what you're suggesting here. Instead of like berating nurses or being disrespectful, just treating them with respect. Again, in the business world, it's just common knowledge. If you take care of an employee, they will jump through hoops for you, right? But that's not often the culture in the hospital setting. And I believe that a big reason for this is that registered nurses are often treated as a commodity. In other words, they can come and go because we have a glut of people who want to be registered nurses. Well, that might have been true in the old days when primarily registered nurses were women. Women either went into teaching or into nursing, but that's no longer true. And that's why we've got to get back to where we create a culture that's attracting people to the profession. Today you hardly hear somebody go, "Oh, it would be so cool to be a nurse." Whereas in my generation, that was a cool thing to be. And I think we need to get back to that, making it something that is cool for people. And then once they get into it, they're not disappointed. The young nurses especially, they articulate that it's not what they thought it would be. And that is a hard thing for a young person to come to grips with, that they thought they were getting into one thing, getting to help heal and take care of people, but then, it's a lot of other stuff, like the administrative headaches and all of that.
We have a comment from Roxanne Riskin. I want to read it here.
Yeah.
It says, "Can you discuss how patient safety might be compromised with nursing being under so much stress?"
Yeah, thank you, Roxanne, for asking that, because there was a 2013 study in the Journal of Patient Safety that revealed as many as 400,000 people die a year in hospitals from negligence. Now, this can incorporate both nursing and medical negligence. But to kind of put this in perspective, this is 2 jumbo jet crashes a day, right? And in the U.S., if we had, 2 jets crashing a day, well, first of all, that would be all over headline news. And secondly, the nation would be in arms about it. This is why I call this whole issue kind of a silent epidemic, because it happens to one patient at a time, and so a lot of times it doesn't get the national attention that it deserves. But for sure, I think Roxanne's onto something, and we really haven't studied how stress contributes to errors. But I think intuitively we all know that the more stressed a person is, the poorer judgment they're exercising, or if they're so fatigued, as you said about your husband, when he was doing his residency. We know that sleep deprivation, bad diet, stress, all of that's got to contribute to bad choices.
Well, and then one of your past topics, the amount of authority and voice that nurses feel they have. Nurses are there in the trenches, as you said, and they observe the things that are being done that put patients at risk. And I've heard stories in our healthcare community where when leaders went out and said, we want any suggestions you have, and they opened it up to people that were not necessarily sitting around the leadership table, that they got the most fantastic insight, and sometimes it was the simplest changes that led to so many a reduction in accidents, falls, all kinds of things, simply because they took the time to give those people the voice. And I think they're missing out on that when they don't give nurses that opportunity to give that feedback and observation.
Yeah, and also to not just hear the feedback, but to actually execute on it. Because, again, I think that's where voice is important. A lot of nurses sometimes feel like, okay, they pretended like they wanted to hear what we had to say, but they really didn't. As you're suggesting, there's so many things that healthcare facilities can do that cost nothing, and that's a really good example. Such an inexpensive opportunity.
Well, I think, have we covered all of the topics here on your survey? I think we have.
I think we hit the highlights for sure. And again,
There's so much in this. There's so much in this that I can't wait for this to go public so you can share it with everyone.
Yeah, it's going public on June 30th. And if anybody would like to know how to go about receiving it, they can certainly go to legalnurse.com. And if you want, we could also give you our office number if they want to know how to receive it as well.
Well, if you would like, you can post that on the event page on Google+. That will also show up on YouTube that way, and then people that see it either place will be able to have that information. So whatever information you want to provide to viewers, that would be wonderful, so people can find it during and after. That would be great. There really is a lot here. There are so many things that could be done to just improve the environment and get some good results from it, that I'm so glad that I've had an opportunity to talk to you and have you share your survey.
Thank you, Kathy, and thanks for caring about this elephant in the room.
Well, I look forward to having future conversations with you and see what else you reveal, and to see what kind of change you can initiate with the survey results. I hope that you will stay connected and continue to engage with the people that have viewed today in the Healthcare Talk community, and maybe we can have another follow-up hang-up to see what you've heard from people after this goes out in the public.
Thank you so much.
So thank you, Vickie Milazzo, for your time and sharing your survey. And this concludes tonight's Hangout. And goodbye, y'all. And continue with your comments on the event page. And I'm sure that we will continue to engage with you. And Vickie will probably continue to answer questions as well. So have a great night.